Do you wish you could improve and make way more profit at your lawn and landscape company? Is adding more services the way that you do this? Now, while this may seem like the obvious path your company needs to take, it could actually be a really bad idea that hurts your brand and actually your profit as well. Hi, I'm Chad Diller with Landscape Leadership. I'm the Vice President for the organization, and we are a sales and marketing company that works exclusively with the lawn and landscape industry. If you own or you work at a company like that, you are in the right place because this is where we tackle difficult subjects like this and have very candid conversations. So we're going to talk about this today. Today's episode is entitled, How Over-Diversification of Services Can Actually Hurt Your Brand and Profit. I'm not going to tackle this by myself. Our specialty is sales and marketing, and I'm going to bring in a well-known industry consultant today to talk more about this, about financial and organizational health and how this actually could impact your green industry company. So if you're here, I'm pretty sure that you're in the lawn and landscape industry. That's where most of our viewers and listeners come from. And you probably all have this one common goal. You want to grow an amazing business, a profitable business that results in becoming a leader. That means you're a leader in your prospective customer's mind, and you're a leader in a prospective team member's mind. But there's just one problem. There's a ton of competition out there. And most of these people out here in these audiences, whether it's prospective clients or prospective team members, could see you as just another landscaper or just another lawn care company. And you don't want that. You want to be a distinct, true leader. Over diversifying your company's services could be causing this problem to get bigger. And now I know what you're saying. Our company, we clearly stand out. We're very, very different. But also, you could be way different and you could make way more profit and it could be even more clear in your prospective client or team member's mind. And we're going to talk about that and unpack that today. You also might not be living up to your full potential. You might say, we have a pretty healthy organization and we make pretty darn good profit, but you could be doing better. And so we want to explore this topic a little deeper today. Let me give you some context before we get into this. I'm going to rely on experience and expertise. I've been in the green industry for about 24 years now, and our guests, even more experienced than that. But we're not just going to rely on the experience in our industry. We're also going to be sharing concepts in business that relate to all types of business. And sometimes the green industry doesn't always do what's accepted in other areas of business. And so we want to challenge your thought today and talk about these issues. At the end of the podcast, I am going to have some resources for you to explore on the marketing side of this. And I'm sure our guests are going to have some resources and things that you can check out the financial and more deeper organizational health areas of this discussion. Our guest, I'm going to introduce him now. He's owned a successful, actually, I think a couple successful landscape companies, and he has been around, like I said, even longer than me, worked with dozens, if not probably hundreds of companies in this industry, and for a number of years, and have helped them grow really successful businesses. He is a successful industry consultant, author, and just an all-around great guy. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's guest, Jeffrey Scott. Jeffrey, it's so good to see you again.
I'm ready to roll.
Oh man, I think the last time we saw each other, we were in like cold Michigan. It was kind of brutal there, but it was a good time. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, that was interesting dinner. It had the calories of every type of steak and dessert. That was a little disconcerting, actually.
Well, the most disconcerting thing was when the waiter actually dropped food on my back. Luckily, it was just a roll, like when he was walking past, and you're like, hey, you dropped a roll on this guy. I thought we were going to get free steak out of it or whatever, but we didn't. So anyway.
Yeah, it was amazing how many calories that tomahawk steak was.
I know. We shouldn't look at that.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks so much for joining us today. So to give the viewers and listeners some background, Jeff and I, we've connected and seen each other and passed each other in airports and conferences a number of times, and we've spent a little bit of time talking, but it was fun to get down to things a little bit more detail and get to know each other personally when we met in Michigan recently. And I actually spoke before you did at the Michigan Nursery and Landscape Association, and then your session was after mine. And I stuck around and sat in your presentation, and this whole issue, at least in my mind, kept popping up of this whole thing of service diversification, meaning like how many different types of services that lawn and landscape companies offer. It kept bubbling to the top. And so I thought it'd be really fun for you and I to cover this from a couple different angles, our expertise, sales and marketing. I could talk about that, but I know that you're deeply involved with companies from a financial and overall health standpoint of their organization. So before we get started today, why don't you give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, where you came from, your experience in the industry, and what you do right now?
That's a big loaded question. I will give you try to give a concise answer.
Sure.
So I'm from the industry, grew up in the industry, family had a pool and then landscape business. But I've also spent time outside the industry. I earned my MBA. I did professional corporate consulting in Europe. I lived in Europe for a while. And I came back and worked in the family business. I was running it at one point. And then I got back into consulting, but instead of, big corporate consulting, I focused on the green industry. And I just love working with entrepreneurs. I think I would shoot myself if I was back in mega corporate consulting again.
I'm sure.
And so I've worked with, let's see, we added it up. It was something like over 325, maybe 350 companies by now.
That's amazing.
And yeah, it is crazy, either through the peer groups I run or one-on-one coaching. And so those are the two ways that I'm helping the landscape industry, keep evolving, moving forward, become more professional with more professional owners, earning a professional living and making their companies a real investment, and enjoying the work more and enjoying their life more.
It's awesome. How many years have you been at this as a consultant?
So LinkedIn says 15 years. So we're going to have to go with that.
Yeah, that's the ultimate source of truth for everything, right? That's great. Good.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump into this topic kind of head first. And I just want to first say off, I'm fine with disagreeing. I think we'll agree on more than we'll disagree on. I think me as a marketing guy probably comes at it maybe a little dogmatically sometimes. And there is a bigger discussion to this. I don't want to anybody to be listening to this to think that we're just saying, hey, this is what you need to do. I mean, this is really complex. To start off.
This reminds me of Monty Python. I got to tell you.
Why?
You're like, I think we'll disagree. And I'm thinking in my head, no, we won't.
So I just set us up for a big argument here.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to start this off by reading a quote. Business is a game of margins, not a game of volume. And then here's another one. Companies fail because of thin margins. Frankly, successful companies are profitable companies. So as we're talking about over diversification, meaning too many services at a company, how have you seen that hurting the profitability at lawn and landscape companies?
Well, diversification, if we think about stock market and portfolios and putting your money into a fund, that's the whole concept. You diversify risk and you trade off volatile profitability for average but lower profitability. So it's built in to the whole theory. Diversification is supposed to mean smoother but lesser profits. Now, I've actually seen this when I've measured companies. I've seen that more diversified companies tend to have a higher equipment costs, meaning they don't make full use of their equipment as they would if they were just all in on one thing,
right?
Because they could just make better use of all the equipment. So if you're trying to do a little bit of everything, you're going to have to own a lot of different equipment. And so taken to the extremes, you could see how that on itself would hurt profitability. And of course, it's harder to scale and grow bigger when you're growing broader. Now, I'm not a fan. I don't know if that's the right word, but I am not against diversification. but it just has to be done smartly.
Yeah, the discussion's a bigger one, and you talked about like even like just what you're buying for your company. Like I've dealt with clients before that, you know, are really, we'll talk about positioning a little bit, just really widely positioned. They're actually running 2 CRMs, like, so a different tech stack. You know, they have these customers over here and this one and those over there, and that's just like a symptom of the bigger problem. Like you talk about equipment, but like you talk about team members and spaces and all that stuff. Like it just overcomplicates it. And again, it could be worth it, but it overcomplicates it.
Yeah.
As we talk about this topic, I want to introduce a concept that might be new to a lot of the people that are watching or listening. It's called positioning. In the marketing world, simply put, positioning includes the services you offer and who you do it for. And today I'm just going to focus on one element of that. And that's, we're talking about the services that you offer, not the whole like audience versus the residential versus commercial. That's like a whole other ball of wax. I don't really want to get too far into that. But to envision this whole thing of positioning, if you're listening or watching this, I want you to take a mental exercise here and imagine yourself standing in a big grass field right now. You have a shovel in your hand. And as you consider adding a service division, think about digging a hole for that service division. Okay, so maybe you have a hole for landscape design build. Then you have a hole for landscape maintenance. And then you have a hole for tree care. And as you move horizontally across that field and you dig more and more in holes in these different, very differentiated service divisions, you're horizontally positioning yourself farther. And so you have a bunch of shallow holes. Now, let's imagine this in a different way. Say one of those holes is tree care. And when you started with tree care, you started with, you know, just trimming trees. And then you got the equipment and all the things you needed and the personnel to remove trees. And then you decided to add plant health care. And then you decided to add root excavation or specialized injection. So from a positioning standpoint, you can add more services, but do it deeper. So you can dig that hole deeper. So we talk about adding services, at least from a marketing perspective. The thing that I might be discouraging is too broadly horizontally offering too many services. Because you start adding new team members and expertise and all that stuff. So keep that in mind when I say adding services. I'm talking about it's okay for you to, in a lot of cases, to vertically position yourself deeper, but maybe use some caution to go broader. Now,
So do you see this issue a lot with your clients? Like I'm assuming.
I do,
Yeah.
and it creates some significant challenges, I think, that I'm going to get into here a little bit later, just because, again, like you said, you got CRMs, you got equipment, you have expertise of team members. It creates some cultural issues too with like different departments. And I just think that, you know, if you are a little cautious with this, or even decide, like we're going to talk about profit here in a minute, that there are areas that you're suffering from, you actually can see, you know, your business get better. So do you feel like that clients do this just because they're trying to just get more revenue? I mean, like, is that the ultimate goal here of adding these services, or why do you think this is happening?
Yeah. It's like that joke about the what is it? The scorpion on the frog.
I
Why did
haven't
you
heard that
sting
one.
me? Right? Or the
Yeah.
scorpion convinces the frog to uh, take him across the river. And the frog's like, no, you're going to sting me. Well, why would I sting you? If I sting you, we'll both die. We'll drown in the river. And the frog's thinking, he's like, okay, drop, get on my back. And so they're going across the river. And then the scorpion stings him. And he's like, why did you sting me? We're both drowning. And the scorpion's like, because I'm a scorpion. And so I think some part of the answer is that entrepreneurs need to entrepreneur. Is that a verb? They need to do that entrepreneurial thing. So I think that's part of the answer. It's because they can, because they need to, because they're born that way. They have to. Um, you know, you say it's for more revenue, but it's also just sort of how many entrepreneurs are hardwired.
Yeah.
You know, I think you can sell more services to the same client, or have one service and sell it to more different kinds of clients. And I think the issue is when you get into we're going to have a new service and we're going to sell it to a new client. That's like a whole new business. So it's, if you can imagine a graph, you know, you can have new services, new clients. That's one degree of difficulty, but may actually add a lot of value to the company and the client. But when you go for new, now we're in a whole brand new hole that we've just dug. And still, I have clients that do that, and it's because they're scorpions and they need to do it. But you get the right leader, and you want to have a whole separate business. Plenty of entrepreneurs that are hardwired that way. I spoke to a guy 2 weeks ago, and he's got this huge lawn care company, and he's an old Texan, old guy. I mean, not old, but old generation. And he's from the oil industry. So he's got oil wells, he's got this huge lawn care company. His son is running a non-profit drug rehab that they set up. And so this guy's diversified. He's got all kinds of companies.
But you wouldn't run all those under one company name, because it would be silly from a marketing perspective to be like your landscaper's also drilling oil and running a drug rehab. So like at some point there's this mark where you go, okay, you know what, this really just doesn't fit. Let's start a separate brand. And I don't want to get into like brand extensions and separate brands and all that stuff. But yeah, I think serial entrepreneur, people like.
Wait, maybe we should get into brand extensions, because
okay,
that's, and I still want to answer your question. I have a few more thoughts, but that's such a key question. Do I start up, let's say I'm going to do lawn care, new product to new client, so it looks like a different hole. Should they start up a new brand because I can sell it one day and it's a separate company? Or should they keep it under one company and keep their focus in terms of one QuickBooks, one brand building exercise? Like, what, you're the marketing expert. What would you advise them to do?
Well, we've seen clients do this both ways. And again, it's not always like, maybe there's a more right answer in some cases, but it's not always a right or wrong. There's a trade-off every time you do this. So I think it comes back to like, what is your core competency? I think from a brand standpoint, and you conveying to a prospect what you do and who you do it for, if it's too wide in your positioning, for example, if you're a high-end creative firm driven by high expertise and very intricate products or services that you're providing, so you're doing like these massive $250,000 backyards, and then you launch a spray division, you're going to really struggle, because in the marketplace, you are already seen as this creative firm. Or if people do start seeing you this way, it's going to start watering down your true expertise. So I've seen most companies be successful when they create an entirely separate brand. Now, you can go off the rails with this. I mean, we've dealt with people in the past where, they've had a pool division and a landscape division and this and that and that. Because if you're still kind of in that bucket of like a higher end creative project-based service, you can kind of lump a lot of that stuff in together if you just don't go crazy. Versus like that production culture is very different. That commodity service that is cheaper, that people constantly cycle through, is very different than like a custom design build vendor. So I think
there has to be a real strategic reason, like, hey, I'm going to sell this lawn care business in 5 years, but that might not even be strategic enough. Plenty of lawn care companies will buy your clients. But if you're saying, well, I'm going to go multi-state with this new company, okay, new company. And so I think even the strategy needs to get tested to see if it really makes sense, because how hard it is to spin two brands, two plates.
Yeah,
that ain't easy.
And it's hard, the more time and energy and thought and resources you have to focus on one area of business. Like, there are things constantly that I'm like, we should do this. And then when I have chance to pump the brakes a little bit, say, just because you can doesn't mean you should, because it will start stealing away from getting deeper with our level of expertise and excellence on certain areas in our business. So what is happening internally that we just can't sell more in that area? Yeah. Or why are we not making more profit in that? So I want to come back to the whole revenue versus profit thing. I love the lists. I love the top 100, top 150, but they're a measure of revenue. And when I'm in industry settings, and talking at mixers, it's often like this: how much revenue do you guys do? It's this conversation. Maybe it's easier to spell out, but I feel like these top line revenue numbers, I would love if somebody came out with a list, maybe if people were honest about it, like the top profit companies or top net profit or whatever. Wouldn't that be
That
awesome?
would be the drop your shorts list.
I mean, that's great, right? And maybe sometimes company owners are afraid of sharing that because they just don't want their team members or somebody know how much net profit they're making. But
that's one of the underpinnings of my peer groups, because we drop our shorts and we look at everything. We do the X-ray, not just the bottom line, the top line. We look at the middle and all the pieces.
yeah, but even in revenue, like if you look at those top 100, top 150, and you look at the top 10 companies, I did this the other day, and you look at them, you can see some very narrow positioning. Some of them are very obvious. They only do commercial or they only do residential. A lot of them are these commercial companies, but like Brightview, number one, focus, like their main focus, commercial maintenance. True Green, mostly residential. We know they're doing some commercial and get into some other stuff too. Lawn care and spray services. Davy Tree, they started out tree. Now they're doing maintenance. So they're getting a little bit wider, but still honing in on that commercial market. And those companies that are making the most revenue, like I don't even know where their profit is. They are trying to hone in their positioning. They're trying to not do as many things for as many people. So what are some signs, like when you start working with clients, what are some signs that you see that they're too widely positioned, they're doing too many things for too many audiences? How do you diagnose that, and like what do you commonly see?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do a lot. When I do consulting, it's really a form of strategic planning with the owner and their team, and we're setting strategy. And what is strategy, right? It's sort of a conceptual, high level word, but in our industry, strategy has a lot to do with, let's look at the different divisions and what are we gonna do? How are we gonna improve our mix, change it? What are we gonna do in divisions? And then as a collection of divisions, a lot of strategy has to do with that. Not all of it, obviously, but that's a piece of it. I have this concept called fix, fire, fill, and it's really was born out of maintenance, right? You have clients and divisions where sometimes you have to let go of clients, prune the 10%, and then grow the 10%, and that's how you can sort of fix a division. You have some clients that you're gonna change the margins, and so fix the margins, and some of them will quit, but some of them you just have to fire them and prune them off, and then you fill. And so it just like you take care of a tree, maybe we should think of it as a bush, a hedge, but there's ways to go about taking care of a hedge that to the untrained eye might look like you're killing it, but you're really making it healthier. And so you can improve a division that way, but you could also look at all your divisions that way. Which divisions need fixing? Which divisions really are a distraction and we should get rid of? And which division should we focus on? And I think it's not really a black and white answer, but I can give you some examples.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So Matt, I won't mention your last name, but Matt and his team were here a couple weeks ago. He's from Colorado. All right, Matt from Colorado. And he has had this vision for a garden center for many years, and was just, depending on what day you talk to him or his leadership team, they loved it or they hated it. And so I looked at all the divisional numbers. I looked at the garden center, and immediately I said, we have to shoot this. And immediately him and his team said, yes, you're right. So they were of like two minds, and they just needed me to say, no, we're going left here, and we're going to shoot this thing. And the decision was made like really quickly. I was like, well, that was quick, but it was bleeding them. And I could tell from the numbers that you couldn't fix it. Um, and his other division, which I won't mention, but his other division was both very unique and very strong, like this unique niche. I'm like, oh my God, what a unique niche you have here, and you're doing this other thing. So, God, let's kill this baby and let's really grow this one. And so it was both by looking at the weakness and the strength that I could just tell one had to go. Now, here's a whole other example. His name is Chris. Actually, you'll know his last name. I've done a podcast with him, Chris DiStefano, and he loves hardscape. But after he did an analysis, I'm a big believer in throughput. And so analyzing the throughput, he realized that, God, we're great at flat work, but we're terrible at walls. And so he subbed out the walls, which you can do, right?
Yeah.
Not doing it can also mean not doing it in-house and
Right.
subbing it out. And he got much higher throughput, or he gets much higher throughput on his flat work. And so he now doubled his capacity for flat work by stopping the walls. And by subbing out the walls, he got additional profit on top of the flat work profit. So it became win-win from a profit perspective. And so sometimes deciding to sub it out is a sort of a third option there instead of like not doing it.
Yeah, I think like even subbing out something that's kind of, like a fence, fencing or whatever you want to fill in a blank with.
Oh,
then
yeah.
It doesn't, even if it's, like you're doing maintenance on the property, but you're more kind of like landscape maintenance and you're not into the spraying and that sort of thing. And you have a good partner to sub it out to, then it just doesn't start from a marketing perspective, diluting your brand image a little bit because you're talking about this and showing so many other things. Cause it's a service maybe you're offering to like 2 or 3% of your clients. So instead of like devoting like another eighth of your marketing visually on that, you kind of look a little more specialized. Like I always say, one of the questions I ask.
Fencing?
Yeah, we can talk about fencing.
You mentioned fencing, and so it's a third example. You're always supposed to have 3 examples, right? So my third example is fencing. Justin, you'll know who you are. A client has a fencing division, and even before I looked at the numbers, I'm like, "Are you sure?" Because they're not, it's like garden centers. You better be good and have the right combination and niche. We look at the numbers, and I'm like, "You have to kill this division." And I don't know if he had just hired somebody or promoted somebody, and they're making money until I really took his numbers and reorganized them. And I said, here, look, you're not making money. And they went back, the company went back and they're like, we're going to keep it. We're going to give it one more year try. And so end of the year, we get around, look at the numbers. He's like, you know what? You were right. The first time we met, we're getting rid of that division. And then that manpower can go towards something that's profitable. And so just because your clients are all asking you for fencing doesn't mean you should do fencing.
You're right. We got into that, I don't want to protect the innocent here, but like somewhere that I was associated with in the past, one of the predominant phrases I kept hearing is, we don't want our competitors on our property. And so like you start adding all these services that you're maybe not great at, you're good at, but you're not the best in town, just to preserve relationship. And I would say then maybe work on your relationship and work on a partnership. Like don't be threatened just because someone else is on, because if you don't have a great relationship, you're getting replaced, whether they do it all or not. So that's a big problem. So let's talk about like if you identify that a company needs to like prune, like you said, prune a division out there. How do you go about doing this? Like, how do you drop a service?
You mean besides, hey, we're not doing that anymore?
Well, I mean, beyond that, I mean, what's the practical implications of this? Like, what are some steps that you have to take organizationally, and what happens? Because a lot of times people will be like, well, there's this person that I really love, and they're the head of that division. I mean, like, this isn't an easy decision to just do this.
It's going to depend case by case, right? So Matt with the garden center, he had one overhead person, and they needed help with their core business, and so shifting that person over. Chris he was able to just take his capacity and do flat work. The fencing division that I spoke about, is there room for that person? And if there isn't, you've got to make a bigger, tougher decision. We don't make enough tough, difficult decisions as entrepreneurs. And so sometimes you just have to make that difficult decision.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Some
tough.
some people will say, here, I'll set you up as a sub, but that's really a special case. Yeah.
Do you feel like that this having all these different service divisions, because I saw this, like, it's kind of like the high school lunch table where you have this group of people that sit together and that people sit together. And I know there's always going to be some of that camaraderie, but I mean, I almost saw that, like, the design build people over here, like you have this whole department and culture that it's hard to connect with the spray techs over here, or within the organization. Like, the wider and wider you go, like, is this a hard thing that will cause like an identity crisis from a brand standpoint, or a culture crisis?
I'm reminded of entrepreneurs that love design build and have other divisions, and they spend an inordinate amount of time in that one division. And that one division may not even be making a lot of money, and it's certainly not building the value of the company. Install work can give you cash flow, but it doesn't necessarily build sustainable value. And so I think if the owner is sucked into one of the divisions, that's a problem. And if the owner really can pull out and give umbrella attention, then it avoids the issue you just raised.
Yeah, I remember an operations manager telling me that their department was the redheaded stepchild of the company. And in essence, what he was saying is, my division doesn't get the attention. We keep asking for the support, or whatever it might be, and I'm not getting it because there were so many things to focus on. And that's hard. That creates division with having so many divisions there. It's hard.
But can I go back to something you said about keeping competitors off your property?
Yeah.
I do think that's an issue when it comes to enhancements. And in the past year, 2-3 years, we've been so busy taking the new client with the new work that we haven't spent enough time, I say we, as an industry, haven't spent enough time going back and servicing our past clients. We forget that selling enhancements is customer service. People want to buy things. By the way, this is more of a total sidebar, but I didn't quite recognize it until someone told me, but politics is all about budgeting. When you make a law, you can't enact that law without money. So all of lawmaking is really about spending money. And I found that kind of interesting. But and so back to customer service. Customer service almost always is about, they want to spend some money. They have a problem. They want some attention. And so, but if you don't give them that attention, they will call your competitor. And that's the wrong route to, that's the bad example of, hey, here's a competitor on your property, because you're not servicing your client. And so I think that's something you can't just ignore, but you really have to take care of.
Yeah, I think again, back to that whole over fixation on revenue and growing more services and more team and doing that, everybody wants to do a better job for their clients. But sometimes you can't predict how better service will actually impact you. And I see a lot of companies, like even in like this commoditized lawn care space, you look at the bad ones, their churn, the amount of churn they have to make, and how much energy goes into sales and making these new sales because they're replacing clients all the time. And it's just hard on your team members. It's just this systemic problem that maybe you should focus a little bit more on the service standpoint and actually being more profitable as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this is an awesome, very big, never-ending conversation, and I know that it's not something that we can take care of in 45 minutes. And I think it's something that we all maybe want to think a little bit more about, and it's really complex. So there are trade-offs, things that you could be missing. It's really important to explore relationships with like industry consultants like Jeff that can really take a look at your business a little more holistically and look at the problems and diagnose things and take this opinion out of it and look at that. So if someone were to want to connect with you, Jeffrey, to explore this topic or other things about their business health, what are some of the best ways that they could do that?
I'll give you 3 ways. So my website is jeffreyscott.biz, jeffreyscott. And if you go to the top, there's my newsletter. You can sign up for that. I spend a lot of attention and time on my newsletter. I get a lot of great feedback, so it's a lot of value add. If you just implemented everything in my newsletter, you wouldn't have to hire me. Not quite true, but my point is there's a lot of value there. I do a podcast myself, The Ultimate Landscape CEO, and I do it every 3rd week. It's always about someone else's story, or 80% are about someone else's story. And then if you wanted to talk to me about joining one of my peer groups or getting personal coaching, you go to the pages I have on my website, and there's actually an application, a self-assessment you fill in. So a very value-added approach to even our conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jeffrey. Again, appreciate just following up again with you. And I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon again at some industry event. We'll hang out, and maybe this time a waiter won't dump food on me, and we'll not look at the calorie count on our meal that night.
We've got to pick a different menu so we can just indulge without...
We'll just go to the salad bar. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jeff. You have a great day.
Thanks. Thank you.
As promised, I do have some more resources for you. If you want to explore this whole concept of positioning from a marketing standpoint, there is a classic book called Positioning, and it is by Al Ries, R-I-E-S. It's been around a long time. It's just a fantastic classic that you want to read. One of my favorite quotes from Al is, "Positioning is the fine art of saying no." Maybe there are some things at your lawn and landscape company you should say no to. Maybe there are certain services that you are thinking about adding, or maybe you already have added, that you should say no to make more profit and create a more healthy organization and a clear brand message. Maybe there are certain areas that you cover that really you shouldn't. Maybe your marketing should be better so you can pull in that boundary. And maybe there's certain types of clients that you're serving, certain sectors, like maybe you're a commercial company and a certain sector you're serving is just not a profitable, great fit for you. Maybe some of the ways you actually sell and service to these clients or prospects is something you should be saying no to. So I hope this has got you thinking about those things, and we challenge you to explore it further. If you like today's episode, share it with a colleague or green industry peer. Maybe you guys can have a great conversation and circle back to either me or Jeffrey. There's some places that you can connect with us. So Jeffrey, his website is jeffreyscott.biz, B-I-Z. There are ways you can sign up for events and subscribe to his weekly updates that he sends out. And check out the Landscape Leadership blog. You can actually sort by category, and there's a category there for positioning if you want to read more deep discussions about this horizontal and vertical positioning. All kinds of sales topics in there as well. We hope that exploring your green industry company's positioning can actually make you more profit and grow a healthier organization, ultimately lead you to becoming that leader in your marketplace that I had talked about, not just another landscaper or lawn company. Instead, everyone will know who you are, and you'll be very different, and you'll make lots of money. So thanks so much for joining us today. Have a really great day.